Moderating our panel today are Rebecca DeChico, Principal Digital Operations at Oricon. We also have with her Dominic Martins, who is the Design Technology Leader at Silver Thomas Hanley. We have Ken Lee, who is Group BIM Manager for Digital Engineering at the Robert Bird Group. And filling out our panel, we have Paulina Hadjimatova, who is the founder and BIM manager for Bimetry. I must say, I love that name, Bimetry. Great name for a company. So, and personal thanks, Rebecca. I do run some of these panels, but usually after 10 minutes or so, people realize I don't know all that much about engineering technology. So I'm very pleased that you've taken on the role. So I will hand it over to you. Cheers.
Thanks, Timothy, and to the organisers of the event today for obviously allowing us to I guess, formulate a quite important conversation regarding the construction industry. And our session effectively is about touching on some of the technologies and processes that support the construction industry, but also discussing some of the things Simon picked up on earlier, where the maturity of our industry and where we sit in regard to BIM and digital engineering adoption. So I guess to start with, I'd like just to introduce myself. For those who don't know me, my name's Rebecca DeChico, and I was the director of a consultancy, Digital Node, which was acquired by the Oricon Group in March. And many of the services that we provide are now enveloped into the digital enablement offering within Oricon. And therefore, I have a real interest in the landscape of BIM and digital engineering on a global level, as Digital Node was a UK entity based out of the UK, very closely connected to the UK BIM policy and mandate, and then now looking at how that has fundamentally changed the landscape really of the global construction industry with the initiation and the release of industry standards. So something I'm very passionate about, but very much would like now to move to each of the panelists and allow them to introduce themselves, as we have a really important session today, panel session discussing the importance of AI and some of the technology advancements in construction. So we'll start with Dominic Martins. Dominic?
Hi, sorry, just trying to unmute and it wouldn't let me, sorry. So my name is Dominic Martins. I work for Silver Thomas Hanley. We are predominantly a health architecture firm where we only do health and we only look at pretty much the Southeast markets. We do have areas across all our sectors as such. We do have hospitals in Fiji and Canada that we're currently working on as well, but our predominant market's in the Southeast Coast, and my role is basically looking after all the design platforms and all the technology platforms at STH. So yeah, and we're doing a bit of work with the Novell redesign in looking at how we can better use technology in hospitals and with stroke survivor patients. So yeah, that's the other fun little parts that we play.
Thanks, Dominic. And I know we're going to touch on some of that a bit later, so thanks for the intro. Ken Lee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Ken. I'm the Group Manager for BIM Enablement Digital Engineering at Robert Group. So we are a structural construction engineering, civil infrastructure, and geotechnical engineers. So we operate globally across the UK, Middle East, Asia Pacific, obviously encompassing ANZ. My role predominantly is to provide BIM strategy, BIM enablement, computational processes, and new business in terms of servicing projects, championing BIM applications. And we are traditionally a structural construction engineering firm, but now with digital engineering, we're championing that and pushing digital enablement across all our projects. So we're not only talking about using digital to enhance our construction consultancy, but we're also extracting information and using computational to, give clients the best engineering possible.
Wonderful, thanks, Ken. And finally, Paulina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for the invite first. Yeah, we are Bimetry. We are a startup based in Melbourne. We started just as COVID came into our lives, so unfortunately not the best time, but so far we've been involved on quite significant projects here in Melbourne and also across Australia. One of the projects we were involved in was Northeast Link tender. So our business is basically separated in two main sectors. One is BIM consultancy and project delivery. Earlier, Simon mentioned quite a few of the services that we also provide, such as BIM modeling, BIM management, 4D sequencing, 5D BIM, also energy simulations based on BIM models. So this is one part of our activities. And the other thing we do is development, implementation, and distribution of software, primarily software, but also hardware tools. So we are distributors of Cubicost, which is the market leader in the Asia Pacific for 5D BIM. Not that familiar here in Australia. It is for quantity surveying and fully integrated with BIM models. The other two we distribute is Plannerly, which is enabling a lot of the ISO 19650 workflows. We also are representatives of ZWCAT, and from this year we started also distributing large-scale clay printers. So we're expecting soon one here in Melbourne, which are quite interesting for us to be implemented in landscape design as well as some vernacular architecture projects. So this is in brief about us. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And I think, what a great, I guess, panel that we have today, based on the fact that you all come from similar but very different backgrounds. And that really suits the conversation well, because our conversation effectively is to discuss the future of the Australian construction industry through technology. And as a kind of global advocate for BIM and digital, I'd really like to understand from the panelists to start with what their view of the current maturity of our industry is, because we heard from Simon, and you would talk to anybody really in the construction industry today about the maturity of BIM or digital engineering and the application of the international standard or suite of standards, rather, 19650. We know that obviously the UK very much have been at the forefront of some of these processes and technologies, but I guess starting with Dominic, I mean, what's your impression of the AEC industry in Australia in terms of our technological adoption and our maturity?
I'd say our technical adoption is quite high, and I'd say that we do some things very well in Australia where we communicate and we help other consultants out. So me coming from an architectural background, we're quite happy to help the engineering or the hydraulic services, the structural services help solve problems in the BIM environment or where that may be. But our adoption and our coherence to ISO 9615 is probably not as where we should be in regards to someone like the UK or other countries like that, where they're fully progressing and they're actually, delivering projects to that standard. Whereas in Australia, I look at the health industry, and Health New South Wales is probably the largest health people that like to, progress the BIM, and they're quite pushing forward in what they do and how they do it. And they're only just starting to look at ISO 19650 now and updating it to those standards. So, and that's only just in the discovery, and there was just a project just put out about that. So it's only, in its very infancy of it all. So it's quite interesting to see that, listening to other people, that's where it's at.
Yeah, and I think there's a real, I guess, misunderstanding as to what the context of that standard means in the construction industry. I think culturally we're generally laggards in terms of adopting standards in this region, and I think that's one of the reasons why the UK very much has pushed ahead. But Ken, I mean, from your point of view, obviously across the Robert Bird Group, where you work across the different regions of the world, I mean, what's your take on our maturity here?
I think if I speak on behalf of Australia and NZ, because I'm quite across that, we're not too bad. Basic digitalization and advanced digitalization, we're not too bad. Adoption of the process, which is 19650, we could be a bit slower comparatively to the UK. And the UK guys are on the ball. They really know this is what they need to do. And the reason for doing that is we're cutting a lot of waste and we're auditing what we're trying to do. So that process, I think we are not bad, but we could definitely improve. The other maturity thing that I really want to talk about very briefly is the maturity of software utilization applications. Now that really needs to be championed across ANZ, because you have different levels of skill sets, and some people do it very well, and only a small portion not do very well. But I think that onboarding and uplifting is quite crucial across ANZ.
Definitely. And I think I agree with both of you on the front that, certainly when, before I moved to the UK, I felt Australia back then, which was, 15 years ago, was quite advanced in terms of our digital adoption of software and technology. So I kind of can second that. And I think when it comes to frameworks and strategy, we've just got a little bit further to go. But it leads nicely really to the next discussion point I want to touch on this morning, really, which was about how we ensure that technology can support information management. And again, Simon touched on it this morning in terms of the fact that we need to have data-driven decision-making, and ensuring that we have data-driven decision-making is crucial to BIM adoption in industry. But effectively, how can technology support that process? I mean, Paulina, from your point of view, in terms of project information management, I mean, how do we enforce that consistent framework? And obviously, how is that underpinned by the technology?
Yeah, I would use the opportunity to quote the digitalization of construction report that just came out a couple of days ago,
Sure.
done by the Western Sydney University in New South Wales. So I think this paints a pretty realistic picture where 57% of the builders and 48% of the designers are still using CAD. 42% have arrived to some sort of a mid-level of technological maturity, and 29% are the so-called smart or have that BIM maturity level that I think we're also looking forward to. But I think there is a lot hidden behind these numbers if we're talking about Australia, because here 95% of the organizations that are in the design and construction field are basically small to medium firms. And as a biggest, drawback is usually the cost for the software and the hardware. So in my view, one solution, because a large company, of course, can afford to use all the best, let's say, software tools, proprietary software tools, as well as hardware. But for smaller companies, and this is very much the case in Australia, I think open source is definitely something that can speed up that adoption. Especially now, when also that open source and open BIM sort of mentality is becoming more and more popular, there are really good tools that I just feel like we're not talking enough about it as a plan B, because proprietary software will always have a lot of benefits as a ease of use and things like that, but to make everybody get on board, I think we have to have a lot more of these conversations, and also take advantage of those tools. And
Definitely.
I'm not going
I was just going to say, definitely. And I really appreciate the fact that you've touched on some of those stats, because, I think we neglect to forget how, the industry still delivers, and there's still some real issues with technology adoption in our industry, which are challenges really that we, people like ourselves need to address really on our, on a day-to-day basis. But certainly when it comes to, I think, a really excellent point was that, the 95% of small to medium enterprises, and the SME or the small company really struggles, with understanding how to bring in the necessary skills and requirements. And I guess another thing for the audience really is that we are at a huge issue with skills shortages at the moment across the construction sector. So technology adoption and finding the right people with these skills is really difficult, and we're all aware of that. But I mean, Dominic, I guess what to kind of shift the conversation slightly, the importance of technology for some of your projects and the technology adoption. I know you have some really good examples regarding the projects that you work on in terms of the types of technologies that you use and technology advances that you use to support your clients. Did you want to touch on some of those examples?
Sure. So a lot of our programs and stuff that we predominantly use Revit, and our other major program that we use is Dreyfus, and that's I mean a key thing for me. Even though they're different, one's Autodesk, one's Nemetschek, so you kind of get the yin and the yang, as they say. But with that, I mean New South Wales Health were a big driver in getting Dreyfus and mandating Dreyfus on a lot of their large health projects. So with that in mind, we then progressed our own Dreyfus skills and usability. But for us, that's a key driver for us to keeping the information out of the models. I don't know why you would put more information into a model where you're trying to model and document when that can be kept separate. You can put data sheets, you can put all this other information into it, and then from there that leads into other programs like Reviz2 and BIM Track, and there's a few others that we use for coordination, Clash, and then we work quite heavily on the BIM 360 cloud, so we're also investing in that and the coordination and Clash of that. It's not fully where I think it should be just yet, but it's still only a fairly new tool. So with all those tools in there.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, and your organization obviously supports the implementation of these technologies. I mean, you have that support behind you, right?
Yeah, we've actually got 2 coders on board that basically do a lot of our coding and add-ins, and instead of using something like Dynamo automation and something like that, we use a lot of inbuilt coding, because we can do a lot more with Dynamo and we don't have to wait for each version, and have idiosyncrasies with that. And that then leads us into our AI and our computational design, where a lot of that's done with C+ sharp coding rather than in a visual scripting program like Dynamo Grasshopper, and vice versa. So from that then leads us into AI and generative design, and we basically keep investing into that, because that's where we can see a lot of our technology and proficiencies come from, because we can all design buildings, but checking those designs and making sure that the best standard is somewhat the hard challenge, because that's where you chew a lot of your QA time up. So by creating these tools that do checking of your design is where we see a lot of proficiencies to be had.
Absolutely. And I know, Ken, I mean, when we spoke about some of the processes you guys were integrating across the Robert Bird Group, this was many, many years ago, definitely over a drink at a pub at some point. But we were talking about, how Robert Bird Group effectively have been, in a similar context, I guess, driving innovation using some of these kind of advanced technologies and, automative tools to drive better decision making. I mean, I guess, can you give some examples to our audience on some of those?
Yeah, definitely. I'll just touch on the information management very quickly that Dominic and Paulina was talking about. The double handling, I think, has become an issue in terms of information in models and information not extracted and put elsewhere and driven from CapEx to OpEx, and that itself is causing a lot of, I would say, grief in terms of when people are doing project work. You're doing a lot of double handling, you're putting data here, data there. It's time to move it into one space, and I think database management will come into fruition very, very quickly, and more people adopt it based on that sort of cloud-based database management. The other thing about adoption in terms of technology, we've got so many. We've got Nemetschek, we've got the old plan, the BriskCAD, the CATIA, the software technology. And everybody's using very different ones, and open BIM and common data environment, cloud-based, is coming into fruition more and more, and we're definitely gearing towards that. And to add on to that, the technology that we would like to see used more often are sort of product-based RFID tracking technology, DFMA for DFMA. Which is a huge part of our construction engineering process. I'll give you an example. If you're looking at, if you want to know when certain panels are coming on board, coming to site, that tracking is essential. And then if you're moving panels, if you're lifting panels, to be able to track it and to be able to check what you've drawn or what you've modeled to an exact coordinate, that is really the gold standard that we're currently working towards. And we are working with some partners to allow that to happen very quickly.
Yeah, that's really important, I think. And I know that we don't talk enough about, design for manufacture and assembly, or DFMA, because, I think there's still a lot of confusion around what that means and how that can effectively contribute to projects. But I guess, moving into the AI discussion, I think there's a lot of kind of fear around, artificial intelligence and, the movement toward artificial intelligence in the construction industry. But, much of the research suggests that, there is effectively a large sum of I guess, a pot of resource and funding to support organizations and governments in using data more intelligently. And that relates to not only building projects, but also infrastructure. And even if we move into, I guess, the smart city discussion. But effectively, where does artificial intelligence sit from your point of view? And Paulina, I'd really like you to jump in here, because I think you've got some really exciting examples to give our audience, or really some exciting points to give our audience when it comes to, I guess, the impact or the effect of artificial intelligence in the construction industry.
Yes, thanks for the question. We are at BIM, all of us are quite excited about artificial intelligence, and really, I don't think we all see the potential of it fully. And as you mentioned, there is a fear about artificial intelligence, not only in construction, but in general. And I think also because of the name is a little bit confusing, and I've never really fully understood why we call artificial intelligence, because this is more of a statistics kind of process. And people always think that somebody will replace them and there will be like machines that will run instead of them and things like that, which is not working in favor of for the adoption of the technology in my point of view. But where we have been experimenting a lot in the past year is crowdsourced data gathering, which could completely change the decision making for the whole AC industry, like starting from urbanism, gathering preferences, gathering people's behaviors, gathering all sorts of requirements related to the urban environment, which could then play a role in our design, and also, of course, construction process. And I think this is so overlooked as a potential. This could completely change also, I would say, the whole process that we are currently using, as starting from town planning and so on and so forth. So I was involved in one project which is for data gathering for informal settlements, basically gathering data from the inhabitants of those informal settlements and coming up with planning suggestions based on behavior and preferences. But this was a project that was related to informal settlements, but nothing stops there. I feel like this will be the future of urbanism. So that's one very interesting aspect, I think. Another is, of course, simulations. Simulations are very costly and heavy, and they require a lot of skills as well. So that's one reason why they're also not as accessible to the industry. Let's say energy simulations, wind simulations, all sorts of simulations. At the moment, you need a considerable amount of time as well as hardware requirements just to start with. I feel like AI will make this a lot more accessible for everyone, as well as structural simulations. Like, we have been experimenting a lot using Karamba, which is an add-on for Grasshopper, doing analytical structural models. So basically creating a generative data set, which we later use to predict structural behavior, like for just a randomly designed shape. So there is really so much that I feel like we kind of don't see all the opportunities that AI could give to our industry in particular, and where we fail the most, which are the menial tasks, so to speak. And this could only improve our process and the final quality of the project.
Definitely. And, one of the things that I think that is occurring in industry, like I said, is it's just that fear of application, and the first steps, how do we enable this through our businesses? Where do we get the right resources? How do we ensure that we understand the importance of AI and machine learning to effectively explore the type of work we do in different ways? And again, there are so many startups that are starting to pop up in this space at the moment. So I think that will, and again, as Simon mentioned earlier, with the rate of technology increase going to kind of explode in the next X number of years, I think we're going to see an uptake of these types of consultancies offering their services to the construction industry. But I guess, Dominic, what's really interesting about some of the work that you guys are doing is effectively using AI to support some of the decision making on the hospital projects. Did you want to touch on that this morning?
Yeah, so we kind of were a very early adopter of generative design, and my practice is run by some very knowledgeable architects who've been in the health industry for about 50 years, it feels like. No, they've probably been in the industry for probably about 55, 60 years, both of them. So they know how they design a hospital. They've kept up to date. They've done a lot of them. They've got a lot of good feedback. So for us, I mean, when we go to a user group with the practitioners, we try to show them that we've thought of a lot of their concerns. We've issued them, but a lot of the times they like to see different options, and sometimes we have to say, well, this is the best option for this reason, but having to be able to quantify that rather than just saying, an architect saying, well, this is what it is, this is what I've drawn, this is the best result. So we can actually show them quantify results of, this is the design we've done, this is how it ranks, this is the performance you get, this is the net saving on nurses walking, for example, travel distance, this is the best layout because, I mean, we've got access to all these facilities, we've got access to certain things. It helps with it just helps sell the design to nurses and doctors who, I mean, don't usually get to see in that planning phase that often. They might do it once or twice in their career, whereas for us, we're doing it almost every second or third day. We're redesigning something or changing it for them. So we use AI to help I mean, quantify the design so that, I mean, we can still draw them on pen and paper, but we can then input them into a computer and let AI decide, I mean, have you thought about this? And that's where, I mean, I can go back to my very senior, I mean, designers and architects and say, hey, we've done this. I mean, the AI has given us this. Have you thought of that? And, I mean, 9 times out of 10, they go, oh, no, I haven't thought about that. And it gives them another choice to redesign, another choice to think about it. And we can also go to them and say, hey, look, we've got 2 designs. I mean, this is the one we've done. This is the one that we've got computers to do, and they're very close. So let's see how we can amalgamate the 2 and have a better result for the end client.
Yeah, love it. And I think that this is one of the things that we often, I guess, neglect is how the technologies and the advancements in AI and machine learning can effectively support decision making, but not override, the human element, and I think, those that have that fear, I guess, need to, be aware of that, the fact that they are, intelligent decisions that we can make to support obviously our processes. But I know, Ken, you guys have been using, AI and advanced AI solutions across Robert Bird Group as well. I mean, did you want to give a couple of your examples on how AI has effectively influenced your projects positively?
Yeah, and I'll second what Paulina and Dominic are saying in terms of generative design simulations and providing alternatives. This is what I think we've got the most benefit out of giving alternatives via AI, via generative design. Things like Karumba, Paulina touched on, because if you're working on a project, say you can imagine the various variations that or optioneering that you may come up. But with AI, it's actually helping you to open your mind up a little bit in terms of, have you thought about this? Have you thought about the other options? And we are currently using that. And the next step is just to disseminate that more across our global practices. And that itself is a great challenge, which you're happy to take on. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, we have people that effectively look at, futures within our business that focus on the future technologies to support, our future decision making. And I think having those sorts of people within your business as well to support strategic decisions is very important. And I'm just conscious of time, but we haven't really touched on as much as we could have, how wearable tech is becoming increasingly popular in construction. I mean, I think I'd really like just maybe a quick soundbite from each of you regarding wearable tech and how that's effectively influencing our industry. Paulina, did you want to start off with some of your comments?
Yeah, sure. I will link it back to AI because, I mean, wearable tech, of course, in the face of exoskeletons or AR glasses or whatever it is. It has its own function, but I think what's more interesting is that with these wristbands or smartwatches or whatever, we can again gather data, which we can send back and then analyze. So for me, that is really exciting. Wearable devices combined with AI applications.
Definitely, and the two are linked, aren't they? I mean, Dominic, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, my perspective on it is, I mean, we're doing work with the novel redesign project where we're looking at smartwatches and just tracking of stroke survivor patients, because, I mean, for them, walking 15 meters is an ordeal, and it's not something that they do quite often. So they actually need to like book out a chair halfway down the corridor, and to know that that's free so they can go for a walk is a big deal for them. So, I mean, wearable tech in my mind is, I mean, some stuff that we're already currently using. It's, I mean, booking of systems, booking of chairs, tagging of, of items so that people can book them out, and also knowing of where patients and items are so that they're easily accessible, and we go, all right, they're here, I just need to go grab it, bit, basically.
Yeah, I mean, how technology can fundamentally influence how a person, lives or travels or utilizes a public space like a hospital is so important. And Ken, I mean, what are your thoughts, I guess, as a takeaway, regarding wearable tech?
Yeah, wearable tech. As a last takeaway, safety in construction, we deal with that quite a fair bit, and we have seen, or I have seen, in Asia Pacific and Hong Kong, especially Hong Kong, China, now that they're tracking people on site to see that, has anyone fallen over? Have they walked past somewhere that they shouldn't walk past? And if you've got a wearable device that will beep and that will buzz because there's a danger zone, etc. So that wearable device is coming more and more into play. The tracking of facial features to see who's on site is equally important, and we're mindful that there's a security and privacy issue, but it is really important to show like people should go places on site where they should belong. They don't belong, and it mitigates a lot of hazards and risks on site. So that's where we think it's going, and we have seen it being implemented across China.
Yeah, love that, because again, there's just so much around, BIM or digital for health and safety. I mean, PAS 1192 Part 6 really kind of was the first foundation for that in terms of a standard. And now, 19650 will be released as Part 6 to support health and safety. So I think there's a real appetite for how, these types of techs can support the well-being of people on site. So really, wonderful conversation. I'm conscious that we've run out of time. Look, we could probably speak about these topics all day, but certainly thank you to the panel and for the event organizers, and